How do you deal with all the cravings? All the cravings, especially on keto carnivore, like I was back in the day, the cravings that you get on plant-based, whole foods, the cravings that you get on raw. Hello, everybody, and my name is Ryan. This is High Carb Generator. Welcome to my channel. Today, I wanted to talk about that because it was a question that I get fairly often in the comments section, and I also put out a post like 2 weeks ago about what questions do you have for me. So I'm going to start off with the cravings that I had on keto, because everybody's got cravings on keto and carnivore. I don't care who you are. Everybody's like, well, I'm perfect. I don't stray from it at all. And I don't believe you, because the body runs off carbohydrates. The body runs off carbohydrates. We know this. It's not a secret, right? And even the people who talk about keto and carnivore are the ones who are now starting to talk about how the body runs off carbohydrates, right? And this is what causes the cravings and the binges. The binges are insane on keto and carnivore. Oh, by the way, while I'm talking, I'm going to have in the background one of my bike rides. You are not eating the food that your body needs. So what happens is when you're on keto, I never really did carnivore. Carnivore is a new term. I swear they're just trying to create the new spinoff of keto with carnivore now. Because, there is some difference, but there's not a huge difference. But so what happens is you eat keto, you eat carnivore, and you go into the state of euphoria, right? Because your body needs carbohydrates. If it doesn't have carbohydrates, the systems don't run. Your brain is like 90% carbohydrates. I think your liver is 100% carbohydrates. Your immune system, something like 80, 90%. It needs carbohydrates to survive. It needs glycogen to survive. Otherwise, it just does not operate. This is what it operates off of. It's kind of like trying to put sugar water in your gas tank. Your engine doesn't run off sugar water. It runs off gasoline, so it's not going to run anymore. And it's going to fail. All right, your engine might seize up or whatever's going to happen, and it's not going to run anymore. It's not going to be a car anymore, right? Because it doesn't function off this. Now, the opposite of this is, she's passed now, but my cat. You couldn't give carbohydrates to my cat because she was a carnivore, and she gets her energy off of dead animals, well, actually alive animals that she would kill normally in real life and eat them. Most cats actually will eat the animal while it's still living, which sounds terrible, but they love this stuff. You can see pictures of, maybe I'll put a picture up here. They're just covered in blood. They don't even care, right? You're not going to do this. You're not going to run up to an animal, kill it with these hands that we have, and you're going to eat this. So you're trying to eat a diet that we don't really have any business eating. And everybody, some people are talking about, well, it's in the Bible. It really isn't. Genesis, the first 5 pages or something, Genesis 1:29 tells us what we were supposed to eat. And if you look throughout the Bible, there's plenty of instances where warriors especially would turn down meat whatsoever because they said it would hinder their ability to do what they had to do. Right? So there is many, I typed it in, you can type it into the Google or whatever search engine. I might have actually used DuckDuckGo for this one. And there is hundreds of sightings of this in the Bible. Right? So it's not like in the Bible, everybody's like, oh, just go murder animals, go murder this, go murder that. It really does talk about it. And if you look at the book of Enoch, which is not in any of the Bibles because it's taken out, it talks about how humans used to live thousands and thousands of years when they ate raw food. And God was mad, supposedly, at the humans at the time because of all the things that they had done. So he told them to eat cooked meat, right? Because he knew it would shorten their lifespan. So anyway, that tangent aside, you are not built to eat this way. Even if you do claim that you have to eat meat or whatever, the standard way of doing this back when I was growing up was when you went to somebody's house, they would ask you what starch you preferred, whether it was pasta, rice, potatoes, in the case of my family, because we're all mostly Irish. And then there's some Slovaks in the family, and they like their potatoes too. So It was mostly potatoes. I'm talking back in the 80s and until the late 90s, you mostly saw this, but unless you were a bodybuilder, if you read the bodybuilder magazines, that's when you would start seeing the really heavy emphasis on animal meat and secretions, right? So like the whey protein. Whey protein used to be a byproduct back in the day. They knew it was toxic for the human body, so they would pull it out of the milk. And they would, I forget what they did with it. And then somebody's like, well, we can market this and we can turn this into, the greatest invention and it's so bioavailable and all that, so they fooled you into this. And then back in the 77, there was a book written about the complete protein. And in 78, McCormick took it into the government and they kind of created the food pyramid around this whole complete protein. And so the lies started building. Well, people were more intelligent back in the 80s. Than they are these days, and they saw through that, and they weren't doing it. So it took through the Atkins and all that kind of stuff. It took about 20 years to get this methodology out there that you can live off can't live without carbohydrates. So this comes in the stage of the keto, the carnivore, where you think you can live off this, but you can't. You go into the state of euphoria, like I said at the beginning of this video. You go into the state of euphoria. That your state of euphoria is not a good thing. That means you are going to die if you don't give me the proper fuel. I can't handle this. You start losing your hair. You can't sleep anymore. Your breath is terrible. If you do it for long enough, you're going to start smelling like ammonia. If things start breaking down, then you start getting a fatty liver because of the liver. Once you start smelling like ammonia, you know that your liver is really in bad shape. You got a fatty liver. It can't process anything anymore. You got a fatty liver. Your kidneys can't handle all the urea. And so you start getting gout. You start getting all this other kind of stuff. Now, you may not have the symptoms of it for decades, but it's happening in the background, right? It's happening in the background. All of this is kind of culminating into nothing good. And like I proved in the Pritikin, maybe I'll even pop it in here. Pritikin talked about the angina attacks after having fatty meals.
Smoking damages your red blood cell. High-fat meals, the typical American kind of meals where almost half your total calories in fat, creates a similar problem. The fats get into the bloodstream as you digest them, and the blood gets so coated with fat particles all over that the fat actually coats the inside of the artery linings, coats all the cells, and the red blood cells, you have a fine layer of fat all around them. The fat acts as an adhesive, and when two red blood cells hit each other, as they frequently do, they stick together, and pretty soon you have a clump of red cells stuck together. Now normally the red blood cells, being twice the size of the smallest blood vessels they have to go through, usually bend themselves in half and slither through the small capillaries. But when they're stuck together, they can't bend themselves anymore. It's like a solid cork. It's like a cork in a bottle. It goes to the small capillary, which again is only half the size of the red blood cell, and just blocks it, and it stays there. Now, as the red blood cells are stuck together, those surfaces cannot pick up oxygen. And of course, the parts of the body where the circulation is completely cut off because the clumps of cells are not permitting circulation become starved for oxygen, starved for blood. That too can create angina. We know by Dr. Peter Quo's work. Peter Quo was a Philadelphia cardiologist when he did a study, and he took 14 angina patients, and he asked them to come to his office, and he says, "Don't have breakfast, I'm going to feed you." And what he did was to tape them up with electrodes from electrocardiographic equipment, monitor their blood to see how much fat was in their blood, and then he fed them a glass of heavy cream. 4 to 5 hours after the glass of heavy cream, he registered 14 angina attacks, and yet they were just comfortable in his office, doing nothing special, just letting the fat get into the blood, make the cells sticking together, block the small vessels, and creating coronary insufficiency. The electrocardiographic results also demonstrated coronary insufficiency, whereas in the beginning there wasn't any. Now, Dr. Crow wanted to see if it was the amount of fluid that these people had or what it was, so a short time later he gave the same patients a drink that had no fat at all, but the same amount of fluid and the same amount of calories. 4 to 5 hours after the test, there wasn't a single angina attack, not a single abnormality in the electrocardiogram. So the least thing we have to worry about in our country is protein deficiency. The big thing we have to worry about is protein excess, because not only does the body chase out calcium through the urine, but it chases out magnesium, zinc, iron, phosphorus through the urine too. It minerally depletes you to be on a high protein diet. And not only do you lose the minerals, but you also lose bone structure. Now, Dr. Ralph Nelson, who is Associate Professor of Nutrition at Mayo University, Mayo Medical School, and he works with the dialysis group at Mayo Clinic, tells us that he's seen 20-year-olds that have been on these high-protein diets, a steak for breakfast and so on, already with kidney damage. Athletes, 20-year-old athletes, it's sort of a tragedy that the high-protein diet has been so misunderstood.
So you're giving yourself angina attacks for 4 hours after, 4 to 5 hours after having the fatty meals, and all of a sudden you can't take it anymore. You can't take the lack of sleep. You can't take the hair falling out. You can't take the terrible breath. You can't take any of this stuff anymore, right? And you binge. Now, for me, it was binging on cheesecakes, basically, because at the time that I was keto, in the early keto days, I worked at food distribution companies, and one of the things that we had was Cheesecake Factory cheesecakes. We held them for the location that was coming here to Cleveland, and I think the Chicago, a couple of the others, right? So we had all these cheesecakes, and some of them would just miraculously fall from the rafters and become samples. And I would sample the entire thing. And everybody I know does this, that was doing the quote unquote keto back in the days. My buddy who was doing mostly keto, he would just get like 13 donuts at one sitting and just eat the whole thing, because your body cannot do this for a very long period of time. And so that kind of leads, because we're just not built for it. We're just not built for it. You cannot do this diet without implementations. But as far as like a plant-based diet, you legitimately can do this with very little implementation, very little tools. And if you're even more of a naturalist, if you just go out and like if you're lucky enough to live on Hawaii or in Thailand or wherever, you can actually just go pick this stuff yourself and just eat it. There's nothing but your hands are needed. Nothing but your hands are needed to open this stuff. And everybody's like, well, you can't eat a watermelon. If all melons, if they are ripe, all you have to do is flick the end of it and it cracks open. It's crazy. I've grown these things myself. I've seen it. They just crack right open. And you just eat it. So it just is the way it is. And so people carry this mentality though into plant-based, and they try to eat things that are somewhat similar to keto, or they try to eat a lot of this processed stuff, or they try to do a lot, or they have that starvation mentality, because people started realizing really early into keto life that you can't do unlimited on keto. They say that you can do unlimited on keto, but you can't. So what the chiropractor Berg did and the other paid off doctors at the clinic and other places did was they're like, well, back in the day, we would not have had food for, most of the day. Most of the day, we wouldn't have food. So what you really need to do is intermittent fast. That sounds right. Just don't eat 20 hours a day, and you can eat 4 hours a day. That's it. 20 hours a day. Don't eat, because back in the day, we were stupid. We didn't know how to get food. I know our entire day was based around food, but we were too stupid to find food. So we fasted for 20 hours. Yeah, that sounds right. We'll market that one now. And then we'll sell books, and we'll sell guided meditations about it, and we'll sell this over here. They strip everything from us, and then they sell it back to us for a price, right? And this is what happened to your diet. Your diet was stripped away from you. They strip all of it. Don't eat that. Don't eat that. Don't eat that. And they sell it back to you in a nice package that costs you monthly fees, right? And this is how everything has been since the dawning of marketing. It was a lot more legit back in the 80s, a little bit in the 90s, but you really could see it. They like everything is stripped away from like exercise. You don't really have to exercise on this. You don't have to do this. Sit in your couch, do all your bad habits. Don't do anything. Just fast. That's it. But don't fast on your own. Fast. I tell you what, we'll sell you a program that tells you how to fast because you might do it wrong and you might die. So what we're gonna do, we'll sell you the fast that you need to do, but it's gonna have a subscription to it because your body might change. And yeah, that's it. We're going to do that. And this is how things go. And everybody's like, oh, that makes sense. I pay subscriptions on my my Discovery Plus. Fasting must just be, and people just, you get programmed. This is why they call it programming. TV is called programming. It's the 12 steps. Anyway, so this is what happens. They sell this stuff back to you, and you bring this along with you. So you finally break away. You break away. You can't take this keto life anymore. You break away from it, and you're like, all right, but I still gotta fast because I know that humans were too stupid to find food back in the day, and if they found a food source, they would just leave it because, well, they had a fast, and I mean, just listen to what I'm saying and imagine how the stupidity of this, right? This is marketing. You were sold. Just admit it. And so this is what happens. But you bring this mentality into plant-based as well. And this is why you get the binges in the plant-based world. You watch somebody like Chef AJ, you'll watch somebody, there's quite a few of them. They all look the same. They're all these like tiny little humans. They go tanning so you don't see how bad their skin is. They're tiny little humans, and they always talk about their caffeine or their cacao or whatever it is because they can't handle their own diet, so they're all on stimulants just to get through their day, right? And so they're on these stimulants to just get through their day. And you start following, and again, here's the subscriptions. Just follow me this. I know I do coaching, but people ask me to do the coaching, right? Initially, I didn't know how this thing was going to go. But anyway, if you do, I may as well mention it, right? The Patreon is where I was going to start doing the coaching. I've got it set up because I want to break people free of this mentality, but I don't want you on my coaching for forever. This is a thing, like you get stuck on these modalities, and these people who are teaching this 50-50 play, they want you for life because they're going to have you for life. Because you're never going to survive this, and you're going to have these huge binges, and you're going to go like, oh, I had this binge again, and here they are, here, $1,900 every 3 months. Come on back. I know you had a binge. I know, pat you on the back. Give me your $1,900. Pat you on the back. Oh, it was so rough, and they know it's going to hit because it hits with every single one of their clients, and nobody can figure out why. Or they just get to the point of, well, I'll just have a piece of spinach every day and some coffee, and that'll be it. I have no energy. I can't get anything done. But he said it was all right, and I paid him $1,900 for 3 months, so it must be right. And anyway, so the reason for these binges is you aren't eating enough carbohydrates during the day. Another sign of this is something that I go through is if you don't sleep at night, you didn't eat enough carbohydrates throughout the day. It just is what it is. So you have to figure, if you can't get enough from fruit, then you're going to have to add more starches into your life, right? If you can't get enough, one of the huge things that I go through is I really want it from fruit. But fruit just does not have the carbohydrates in it that it used to. Somebody was talking about the Garden of Eden in one of my videos the other day, and it makes sense. God would have given us these like sugar bombs of fruit to eat in the Garden of Eden. But when you do not grow it in the Garden of Eden, when you don't have good soil, when you pick it unripe, it isn't going to have the sugar content that it is supposed to, and it just tastes terrible, right? And so you just you're like, well, I know there's supposed to be this amount of calories in here, but there really isn't, but there's supposed to be. And so you get into this mindset of, well, I know there's supposed to be this amount of calories in it, and this is all I'm going to eat because I know this is all I'm supposed to eat, because somehow you know how many calories you're supposed to have for the day. And then you do that for, I don't know, however long. And then somebody makes a vegan cheesecake and you eat the whole thing and nobody can figure out why. Oh my gosh, I'm not doing that plant-based. That person's crazy. Did you see what they just ate? They ate the entire thing. I made this for an entire family and they ate it before I could even serve it. And this is what happens when you starve yourself for a long time. Look at the Minnesota starvation study or whatever it was called. I've talked about it on some of the videos in this channel. This is what's going to happen to you. And if you perpetually, because I have been there myself, because you don't always know how much to eat, right? So, but when this happens to you, you're going on a huge binge. And if you do go on a huge binge, or if you just can't sleep, you know you're not eating enough. And that is a very good marker. Anyway, so how do you control that? 17 minutes into this video. How do you control that? You control that by just eating when your body tells you to eat, and stop eating when your body tells you to stop eating. Now, in the beginning, and maybe for some years, your body might be broken. Your leptin might be off. Your ghrelin might be off. And so you might actually eat more than you probably should. You might. But you're going to go through this process of having to recalibrate everything. And once the leptin starts working correctly and the ghrelin starts working correctly and your hormones start rebalancing, you are going to have some kind of drop off in the amount of volume that you eat. So what's going to happen is you're going to make the amount of food that you used to, but you're not going to be able to eat it, but you might try to force feed yourself. So you really have to get in tune with your actual hunger signals, because that's when you start playing into what he talks about in this book, in the Turn Off the Fat Genes with Neil Barnard here. That, I believe, is what he's referring to when he says that you might eat too much to lose the weight. I got to give the guy the benefit of the doubt, only because I've gone through this myself. Once you get to a certain point, you are not going to eat the amount of food that you ate getting into this, right? Your amount of food that you need, because your digestion gets more efficient, your body's more efficient, your hormones are where they're supposed to be, your leptin is where it's supposed to be, the ghrelin is where it's supposed to be. You have less fat on your body, so you have less leptin, you have a lot less stuff, and you're going to need a lot less food. And this is what a lot of people talk about with Durian Rider, that, if they see him in person, he doesn't eat a lot of stuff because his body's efficient. Or, some of these other people that I've interviewed, man, this video is a lot longer than I thought it was. But a lot of the people that I've interviewed don't eat as much food as you think they might, and except for Jillian. She eats like a crazy amount of food. I was surprised. But and a couple of other people that I've talked to, they eat more food than I would think. But this is what's going to happen. And once you get to that spot, then you are going to have to back it off. Don't force feed yourself. And that is where this comes in. If you know when you're full, stop eating. But if you're not full, if the food still looks good to you, you're still hungry. But if the food, you're going to get to that point of this food looks like rocks and worms. I don't like rocks or worms. It's not my diet. And so you stop, right? That is the point you got to get to. It's a little past, I think, the point of where most people do. And this is why they have the cravings. You're going to have the cravings if you don't get to that point. And so anyways, the bottom line, I probably could have shaved a lot of this off this video, but the bottom line is you got to learn your hunger signals. You got to learn your thirst signals too. Like I also tell people, if you're constantly hungry, but you're not peeing clear, I would really pay attention to your hydration before your food. Your hydration is way more important than your food, because people who go through these periods of a bad digestion, like myself, we're not peeing clear, and it largely is because you're not largely. It's 100% because you're dehydrated. And if you're dehydrated, you can't process food correctly. And if you can't process food correctly, then you're going to be bloated. And so there's a bunch of things into this. So watch your hydration and watch your hunger cues. And if you watch those and if you get to the right spot, you're not going to have any of these cravings or binges anymore. You'll be free of that. And then hopefully soon after that, you'll really start noticing the weight coming off because you ate enough. Your sleep will be a whole lot better. Like my sleep on Sunday, this past couple days ago, I had a ton of food. My mom got me vegan jelly beans, and I was crushing those things all day. I had a lot of food that day, and I passed out like you wouldn't believe. I woke up the next day, I didn't even remember who I was. I was just that out, like out for the count, right? So there's that. So you will know once you get there, but until you get there, you're gonna have the cravings and you're gonna have the binges. Anyways, questions, comments, whatever, down below. Like the video, share the video, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next one.